Hey everyone, Internet Vicious Book Reader here. Today I want to talk about The Passenger by Cormac McCarthy. Cormac McCarthy is considered one of the greatest writers, and for a good reason. There's so much subtext into his story that usually you can always view his story multiple ways. It can be kinda hard to read his work because of his writing style where he don't use a lot of exposition and didn't even use punctuation or descriptor to who is talking during dialogue and conversation. Everything is told through the story itself. Thankfully, his writing skills are good enough to do a lot of show don't tell, so as long as you pay attention to them, it is always clear what the story is about and who the characters are. The story in The Passenger starts with a nameless girl talking to a guy whose hands looks like a flipper, who the story called the Kid. She described him as thalidomide kid, which is a medicine in the late 1950s to 1960s that caused deformities if taken during pregnancy, which might have caused his arm to look like flippers. But the most notable thing about the kid is not his flippers, but the way he talks. Let's just say he's a hoot. Try to listen to this very long monologue he have during this conversation. Yeah, right. We're still getting 100 laptops to the drachma, which is okay in the sense that it's not really wrong, but we hope that most of this classical stuff will come out in the bus and we can get down to the normal. You're always going to see different shit once you get everything under the light. You just differentiate, that's all. No shadow at this scale, of course. You got this black interstice you're looking at. We know now that the continua don't always continue, that there ain't no linear Laura. However you cook it down, it's going to finally come out periodicity. Of course, the light won't subtend to this level, won't reach from shore to shore, in a manner of speaking. So what is it that it's in between that you'd like to mess with but can't see because of the aforementioned difficulties? To know. What's that you say? Not much help? How come this and how come that? I don't know. How come shit don't shrink in the rain? We're working without a net here. Where there's no space you can extrapolate. Where will you go? You send stuff out but you don't know where it's been when you get it back. Alright, no need to get your knickers in a twist. You just need to knuckle down and do some gay god calculating. That's where you come in. You got stuff here that is maybe just virtual and maybe not, but still the rules have got to be in it or you tell me where the fuck are the rules located. Which of course is what we're after, Alice. The blessed be to Jesus rule. You put everything in a jar and you name the jar and you go from there a la the Godel and church crowd, and in the meantime, real stuff which is probably some substrate or the substrate is howling us off down the road at a formable speed with the provision that what has no mass has no volume variant or otherwise and therefore no shape, and what can flatten can inflate and vice versa. In the best communicative tradition, and at this point, to borrow a term, we're stuck, right? Yeah, I know. It's one, not that easy to understand, and two, I don't think it's his longest dialogue in the book. His dialogue are not always that long, but he always talks in such a cryptic manner in the book. Then, during their conversation, he summoned an old man using some magic trick. Let's just say the character is a character. The book then changes perspective to Bobby Western, our main character, a salvage diver summoned after midnight on a mission to go check on a plane crash site that has gone underwater. With his friend Oiler, he checked the plane in the darkness of not only the night, but underwater, and found a lot of strangers with the case. One, ain't no way a fisherman found the plane with it being this dark, and two, the flight bag of the pilot are missing from the plane. They don't know what caused the plane to crash and why it was there or where it came from. What they know is that in total, there are 9 bodies pinned by the seatbelt of the plane, 7 passengers and the pilot and co-pilot. And between Bobby, Oiler, and the boat tender, no one wants to have to drag the bodies up with just them, so they went back to land. Back in the city, we know more about Bobby from conversation with his friends. His father works in Hiroshima project that produced the bomb drop in Hiroshima Nagasaki. He used to study math, quite a prodigy at it actually, and he used to race cars in Formula 2, which ends up giving him metal plate in his forehead and one in his chin. Oh, and he is also in love with his sister. Yes, the non-brotherly kind of love. And worse, she's dead. Then the next day, Bobby had a long conversation, which, by the way, will be a staple of the storytelling in this book. That this time, it's with Euler. While Bobby got to throw away his college education to become F2 racer that got him into an accident, Euler went to the Vietnam War. So while they're drinking beers at the bar, Bobby managed to coax Euler to talk about his experience in the war. Later in the night, Bobby got a visit from TPI agents which at first I thought is the book version of McDonald, but unfortunately I think it's Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. They asked him questions regarding the underwater plane he and Euler went to. Apparently, the pilot's flight bag are not the only ones missing. The plane's black box and a 10 passengers is also missing. And from here, the story goes back and forth between Bobby and Alicia's perspective. In Bobby's perspective, we see him living his life, having conversation with various people in his life while trying to get away from the mysterious agents, the them, that are chasing him. He even got his assets seized by the IRS and also revoked his passport. While during his sister Alicia's perspective, we see her various conversation with the kid, who is her schizophrenic hallucination. I think it's peak Cormac McCarthy storytelling. While there are no action in the book, the story is show don't tell almost the entire way through. You really need to pay attention to the story, but I think it's really worth it. For example, a big part of the story is the burden of being born as the son of a sinner, being the child of the inventor of nuclear bomb. They are not shown directly in the story, the bomb is only mentioned briefly sometimes, but those moments really stick. The longest mention of it is a long quote from Bobby about the bomb that really hits hard. There were people who escaped from Hiroshima and rushed to Nagasaki to see that their loved ones were safe, arriving just in time to be incinerated. He went there after the war with a team of scientists. My father, he said that everything was rusty. Everything looked covered with rust. There were burned out shells of trolley cars standing in the street. The glass melted out of the sashes and pulled on the bricks. Seated on the blackened spring, the charred skeletons of the passengers with their clothes and hair gone and their bones hung with blackened strip of flesh. Their eyes boiled from their sockets, lips and nose burned away, sitting in their seats laughing. The living walked about, but there was no place to go. They waded by the thousand into the river and died there. They were like insects in that no one direction was preferable to another. Burning people crawled among the corpses like some horror in a vast crematorium. They simply thought that the war had ended. It hardly even occurred to them that it had anything to do with the war. They carried their skin bundled up in their arms before them like wash that is not dragged in the rubble and ash, and they passed one another mindlessly on their mindless journeyings over the smoking afterglow. The sighted no better served than the blind. The news of all this did not even leave the city for 2 days. Those who survived would often remember these horrors with a certain aesthetic to them. In that mycolia pendant blooming in the dawn like an evil lotus, and in the melting of solid not heretofore known to do so stood a truth that would silence poetry 1,000 years. Like an immense bladder, they would say, like some sitting, wobbling slightly in the near horizon. Then the unspeakable noise they saw burst in the dawn sky ignite and explode soundlessly and fall in long arcs earthward like burning party papers. And that's it, that's the longest quote about the bomb. Mostly we only see the effect of it on Bobby's psyche and how this experience outside his control shaped his actions. There's also small elements of mystery and fear of the unknown working in the story. The opening with the hunter and the woman he found, the girl speaking ambiguously to the kid, the mystery of the plane, Bobby's fear of the dead even when he's a diver, and his fear of being watched all the time. I know that Cormac McCarthy are mostly famous for his very dark and brooding story, but while The Passengers has a lot of dark moments in it, it also have a lot of humor, despite the humor being a bit morbid, I guess. On one of the early conversations, a woman named Bianca had his apartment burned, and after some investigation, they found the arson. Cats. Some cats are running around with paint thinner on their furs, and some of them went to the heater to warm themselves and caught on fire. They caused the apartment to burn down while they're running around on fire, and these are not the exception. There are moments with the same flavor of dark comedy in the book. And speaking of flavor, let's talk about some of the characters in the book. The kid that seems to be Alicia's hallucination is very obviously not the kid from Blood Meridian. In this book, he's more of an antithesis of the kid in Blood Meridian. Here he acts like an agent of chaos trying to cause confusion. Whenever he talked to Alicia, he never called her by her name. Instead, he called her Laura, Jessica, Cindy, never the same name twice. Instead of brooding and quiet, he talks fast and uses long monologue to grab the flow of conversation to his advantage, often ignoring her, trying to belittle her at every turn, even calling her getting a B in religion as an insult despite that's the only subject she got a B in. And It's a B, still good. Meanwhile, the kid at Blood Meridian is a lost boy in a violent world, which is more like Euler in the story who went multiple times to the Vietnam Wars even when he knew that the war is meaningless and that there's no winner in it. One of the best characters in the book, and the person that Bobby have the most interesting conversation with, is his friend John Seaton. I think he's my favorite character here, which might be Cormac McCarthy's real-life friend. There are documents that show him giving a signed copy of Blood Meridian and the Orchard Keeper to someone named John Seaton, but I'm not sure if it's real or not. But in the novel, John is one of the few characters whose death affected Bobby deeply. He had a lot of conversation with him, mostly while drinking wine together. And some of the quotes are just amazing. I know what you're thinking. You see in me an ego fast, unstructured, and baseless. But in all candor, I'm not even the remotest aspiration to the height of self-regard which the Squire commands, and I'm not unaware that it even lends a certain validity to his views. After all, I'm merely an enemy of society while he is one of the gods. What the Squire has never understood is that forgiveness has a timeline, while it's never too late for revenge. Suffering is a part of the human condition and must be borne, but misery is a choice. How to sort your tale from out the commons? It must surely be true that there is no such collective demand of joy as there is of sorrow. You can't be sure that another man's happiness resembles your own, but where the quality of pain is concerned, there can be little doubt at all. To prepare for any struggle is largely a work of unburdening oneself. If you carry out your past into battle, you are riding to your death. Austerity lifts the heart and focuses the vision. Travel light. A few ideas are enough. Every remedy for loneliness only postpones it. And that day is coming in which there will be no remedy at all. I wish you calm water, Squire. I always did. Then our main character, Bobby Western, is one of the most powerful main character in Cormac's work, and his work has a lot of this. He's someone that don't have any drive to live, and it feels like the world kept trying to add his baggage in life. He had no mother, his father was the inventor of nuclear bomb, he falls in love with his own sister that later on killed herself. His friend Euler died in a diving accident after he opened up about his experience in the Vietnam War. Then John, the self-proclaimed cynic, died of hepatitis C. At the end, it's only Debussy feels, the trans woman, the only person at his life that lived and continued to be the one person he can call friend, even asking her to read the letter from his sister that he's too afraid to read. But still, despite having no will to live, he lives anyway, and he kept moving and making friends, and people kept opening themselves to him. And his conversation with these people are what makes the story amazing. Here is a story, the last of all men who stands alone in the universe while it darkens about him, who sorrows all things with a single sorrow. Out of the pitiable and houseless remnants of what was once his soul, he'll find nothing from which to craft the least thing godlike to guide him in this life of days. And there's so much range of conversation from a variety of people, from his grandmother to his friends and his acquaintances, even a private investigator who used to work as a fortune teller in a circus. People he cared at one level or another, and their conversation vary from work experience, opening up to their parents about being trans, quantum physics, John F. Kennedy assassination, etc. And Bobby's life experience with all these different people are juxtaposed with Alicia's point of view, which is mostly just her talking to the kid, which is her own schizophrenic hallucination, so she's basically just talking to herself. Then Alicia choosing to kill herself juxtaposed with Bobby that are too afraid to do it. Everything is so well told though. There is no point in the story where it feels like the author is trying to push you to prefer one character over another. He just told the story that these characters are experiencing. If you're going to read it, you need to also be aware that it is the kind of writing where you might try to connect some things that don't necessarily connect in the book. For example, there are a few imagery of Snow White, the hunter who found a corpse in the snow at the start, Alicia with her hallucination friends that only seems real, 8 passengers on the plane with 1 missing, Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. And speaking of 7, besides the 7 dead passengers from the flight, the bar Bobby frequents is called the Seven Seas. The place he lived after his house got break-in was in room number 7, but it might be placed there ironically or just a random coincidence because it doesn't really go nowhere even if you force this thing to connect. Among all of Cormac McCarthy's work, this might be one of the most difficult to get into, not just because of his writing style but also because this is very dialogue heavy. There's a lot of long monologue during dialogues, which usually don't work in a lot of fiction, but here their usage is mostly justified because they're part of this character conversation. And not only that, but a lot of the story are deliberately not pursued, because Bobby, beside the ingesting, is just some random normal dude. There's no way for him to uncover the mysteries that is happening to him or around him. We never know what happens to the plane that sank at the start. We don't know who the missing passenger in the plane is. We don't know who are the agents that are hunting him down, and we also don't know why they're hunting him. Is it because of the sinking plane? Is it because of his father's research? Is it because of his sister? We don't know because there's no way for Bobby to find out. And the story is not told to uncover this thing anyway. The story is about Bobby's life choices, his friends and family, and the grief for his sister that is a constant he carried in his life even when he went to another country, and how these things affect him. A normal guy that are good at memorizing numbers but starting to forget how his sisters look. At least that's how I interpret The Passenger. A simple story told in such a unique way, just like John Shedden said, unburden yourself, travel light. Personally, I really like the story. I give this a 4.5. What do you think? Are you gonna read it? Did I miss anything? Leave your thoughts in the comment below and subscribe to the channel. That's about it.